As many of you know, Diamond Select Toys has declared bankruptcy, effectively ending their series of Invincible action figures. Let's take a final look at this completed line and speculate on the still bright future for figures from Invincible. Hey y'all, welcome back to Carbon Scoring, the best place for comics history and action figures. Diamond Select's Invincible line of action figures was by no means perfect, but it was improving with each wave, and with a near limitless cast of characters, the future of the line looked bright. Until it wasn't. Now in bankruptcy, the line's future looks bleak, but there's hope. Jada Toys, the makers of the fantastic Street Fighter series, now has the Invincible license, and they've hinted that new figures could premiere at San Diego Comic-Con in July of 2025. But until then, let's look at the complete collection of Diamond Select Invincible figures. Arriving on our Earth in the 1980s, Viltrumite Nolan adopted the last name Grayson and became a best-selling author while biding his time, waiting to conquer the primitive planet.
As it should be readily apparent to anyone watching this video, Omniman was this universe's version of Superman. I mean, it's all right here. The super costume, the giant Omni-Man symbol on his chest instead of the big S logo. He's got the cape. He just, his frame, he just looks like Superman. And of course, he's an alien from another world who has come and adapted to our ways and taken on our values and is here as the most powerful sworn defender of the entire planet. But the truth was obvious from the beginning because there is no way that anybody with that mustache could actually be a good guy. No, that mustache says two things. If you invite this guy over with that mustache, he's only interested in two things: drinking your beer and taking your women. And in the case of Omni-Man, your women means the entire planet of Earth. And that is exactly what this guy came to do. He was the conqueror. He was the Viltrumite ruler. And this figure really sums that up. Now, unfortunately, this is several years old and it's a little worse for wear. The paint that Diamond Select used, it rubs a little bit. So if you get too jiggy with trying to, get this thing into some, cool poses, you're going to see a little bit of paint rub. But it definitely captures Nolan's look from the animated series. It looks like there's been a little bit of kind of, change in the paint here over time, but it's still a really accurate representation. Initially he comes with kind of a flying fist that you can have him sort of like this with like one fist up. His neck articulation doesn't really allow him to get into a super cool flying pose, but at least you get kind of the good guy version of Omni-Man. But you also get this. Now we're talking. This is the Omni-Man that we all expect to see, with those gripping hands and that gritted teeth look and those eyebrows turned down. This is the Omni-Man from the end of the first season, the one who destroyed and killed the Guardians of the Galaxy, the one who beat his son within an inch of his life. Luckily, Diamond Select gave us a version of this that we can put on our shelves that much more accurately represents what Nolan was truly all about. However, that wasn't the end of what they provided with this figure. No, there's one more extra set of hands that we need to look at. Yep, they gave us the baseball catch hands. And I was going to make fun of this. I was going to say like how completely out of character it was, but now that I really stop and think about it, there's really nothing more American than baseball. There's definitely nothing more father-son than playing catch together. And the fact that they were able to do it while using their superpowers in just like a really cool moment that was directly out of the comics, I think it actually speaks more to the future of this character than we might imagine. So while these may seem like kind of hokey accessories, ones that you're never going to use, it's Nolan's love of Earth and his love of his family that really leads to his redemption story that we're beginning to see in the cartoon. So while initially I was going to just completely goof on the baseball hands, I think the symbolism of them really makes sense the more I think about it.
Omni-Man's son, half Viltrumite, half Earthling, Mark Grayson discovers his fantastic powers and the responsibilities that come alongside them.
So if Omni-Man is this Earth's Superman, then that would make Invincible this Earth's Superboy, right? Nah, not really. Creator Robert Kirkman, the creator and the writer of Invincible, he and I are about the same age, and you can tell that we were influenced by much of the same Marvel comics growing up. It really resonates throughout all of his writing on Invincible. And instead of making Mark Superboy, he is much more Peter Parker. He's a teenager. He doesn't have his powers to start out the story. When he gets them, he doesn't exactly know how to use them. There's growing pains. He has trouble in his relationships. You get to watch Mark evolve much in the same way those early Spider Man issues allowed you to watch Peter Parker evolve. And it's interesting because both Peter Parker and Mark Grayson are motivated by a really, really strong sense of duty and responsibility. But as you go through Mark's character arc, you see that he takes it in some very, very different directions than where Peter would take things. But the similarities are still very much the same. So, this was the second figure that was released. It came in the very first wave. And let's be honest, it's kind of terrible. This face paint is so flat. And honestly, the paint on all of this is just really, really matte and really, really flat. And it's the danger that you have when you release some of the most important characters early in a line, because as we see, these figures are going to get better as we go along. But unfortunately, this first Mark was kind of terrible. He does come with several sets of hands. These are his flying hands. So you can get them in that flying pose. But again, the limitation of the neck articulation really doesn't allow you to get into any kind of, genuine flying stance. He has a couple of gripping hands and just one fist hand for his left hand. Not exactly sure why we didn't get two fist hands. And he comes with his baseball glove and like a rocket powered supersonic baseball accessory to fly right into it. So we get to completely capture the scene between Mark and his dad throwing ball. There's also an alternate flat expression head, but this thing is jammed on here so tight and it marks up and scuffs up the paint so badly when you try to take it off that after a few minutes I realized I really don't want to ruin this figure just to show you what the other alternate head looks like. And one of the big reasons for that is because as bad as this figure is and as bad as the paint is, thankfully we got a newer version. So packaged in with a copy of the first 6 issues in trade paperback form, we got a second version of Mark. And look at how much better that paint application is on the face. I mean, it is completely night and day compared to the first version. Now, there were some drawbacks to this second one. Unfortunately, you only get the one facial sculpt and you only get these two hands. And the paint on the other hands is so bad that they really can't be swapped in and out. It's still a matte finish, but it's got a little bit more pop to it. The figure just looks a lot better. And this is clearly a superior version of this figure. Now, we talked about the fact that Diamond Select Toys has gone bankrupt, but there are still two outstanding figures that I have on pre order from Entertainment Earth. They are Entertainment Earth exclusives of battle damaged Mark and Nolan from their final battle at the end of season 1. I don't know that these will ever see the light of day with Diamond's bankruptcy, so I'm not holding my breath on that. And so until the time that those come out, this is going to have to make do as the best Invincible action figure that we've gotten thus far.
Clones of clones of clones, never knowing who came first. The enigmatic Mauler twins were the first foes faced in Invincible as they attempted to break into the White House battling the Guardians of the Globe.
The Mauler twins are big boys, and while it would have made sense to me for these to come as a 2-pack, instead they were sold as individual figures. And I suppose just given the overall heft and size of these, a 2-pack would have potentially been cost prohibitive. Like nobody would have been able to really buy that. So instead, you have to end up buying two and use all the different accessories to get the look of your two Mauler twins. Your basic look comes with kind of a stern, scrunched down face, and he's got his fists. He does have the distinctive painted black fingernails that each of the Mauler clones ends up with. He's in his classic costume, and there's pretty good articulation here. Particularly this cut at the thigh joint is hidden pretty well, and he's got a little bit of ankle rockers, something that the initial waves of figures didn't have. So when you want to get him into more of a wider stance, you can actually rock those ankles out so that he can do that. That's actually pretty cool and a nice improvement over some of the earlier figures. My second one, I put the angry face with the gritted teeth, and I used the gripping hands so that he could hold this weapon that he came with. I think that this weapon was in the scenes with Angstrom Levy. It wasn't from their initial battle against the Guardians of the Globe, but that's kind of a cool nod to second and third season there. And he looks really good holding it because the hands grip it pretty well, and it allows him to hold it in a pretty unique position. These are, classic Invincible bad guys. They're kind of secondary foes. Obviously, I think all of us would have rather had like a giant headed Angstrom Levy or even, a machine head. I know if I was going to get a figure of this size, I wanted Battle Beast. But, the future's still bright for the Invincible line, just not with Diamond Select.
Born in a Utopian breeding facility, the alien known as Alan becomes stronger and stronger with each foe he faces, becoming Invincible's greatest ally for a while.
Boy, we have only begun to skim the surface of Alan the Alien story. He is one of the most fascinating characters in all of the Invincible universe. And I'm really glad that they managed to make him kind of a focus and a transition point from the first season into the second season because he is going to play a huge role throughout the rest of this series. Now, this is, of course, a later release. And so we're getting a little bit better with our paint apps. The color and the pop is still there. Still not a lot of paint on these different heads, but I do love that sculpted, cocked up monobrow. Why monobrow? Because he only has one eye, so it makes sense. Again, you're starting to see some really nice swivel. This is an underappreciated joint when it comes to action figures. If you're going to have the hips that come out like that, it really, really matters for you to be able to get the ankles into that position. And unfortunately, Invincible and Omni-Man just didn't have that. So it really does limit their posing. Now, as I mentioned, this is one of Alan's heads, and this is the other. Here, the monobrow is pretty flat, but he's got much more of a little smirk on his face, which kind of gives off some of the vibe of Alan's character. Could have used with a little bit of paint wash to bring that out. But again, this is one of the earlier series, and they continued to get better as they went along. He also came with numerous different sets of hands. He's got some pretty classic put up your dukes, a nice set of open splayed fingers, some closed grips for holding a weapon that he does not come with, but some decent grippers for holding his notepad, which shows that he is supposed to be going to Urath and not Earth, as well as a three-fingered pointer. So lots of different hands, but the cool stuff that Alan came with weren't just the things that went onto the figure, it was the extras. We got the little worm things that Alan likes to eat that are all like crying out not to be devoured, as well as several different sequids. So the sequids, of course, were the alien species that came back from Mars and just about took over the planet. So you can grip this one onto one of your figure's head and then use these in some different ways. So really cool that Alan came with a bunch of different accessories.
Rudy Connor's shriveled, deformed body belied a keen scientific mind, one that allowed him to serve as a hero through his mechanical drone, Robot.
For me, Robot really shows the mastery of Corey Walker's character designs. Corey Walker was the original artist on Invincible before Ryan Otley took over and then carried the title throughout most of its run. But Walker was actively involved in the project throughout the entire time. He did come back and draw some incredibly important issues and side stories, but he was also super involved with character design, and his design for Robots shows just how brilliant that is. This guy is brown on brown, and you would think that that would never work, but it totally does. And what it allows is it really brings out those green eyes. It really, that brown on brown really makes those green eyes pop. And when you combine that with this almost kind of steampunk motif, you get just such an incredibly unique character. The piping on the top is going to kind of call back to the human form that Robot eventually takes on. So we'll see how that may work together here in a minute. And the figure itself is actually pretty good. You know, the ball shoulders and the hips work really well with the articulation scheme. There's very few kinds of action figures that work better for articulation than robots because they really have the joints already built in. I do like this waist swivel. It gives it, you know, just enough personality. And because you've got a good joint here at the head, you can get a lot of expression out of that. However, the paint apps that Diamond Select use for these can be pretty thick. And if you look closely here at this elbow, you can see how the paint is almost like gummed up in that. And I have never, look, I'm going to try it a little bit. I have never gotten this elbow joint to move. I'm sure I could really super heat it up and get it going, but I am just not going to take any chances with that. So, you know, we're going to have to use our robot in much more of this stance. But Robot is a character who is going to undergo some really significant character development. He already has, you know, even in just the first 3 seasons of the cartoon. But if we're able to see Robot's story carry all the way through as it did in the comics, you are going to find that he is one of the most fascinating characters in this entire universe.
No one fully understands the stress and strain Catherine Shaw undergoes as Duplicate, experiencing the full emotional upheaval and pain as her replicants are slaughtered in battle.
Duplicate is unfortunately one of the weakest figures in this line. The facial design is really flat, and I know that it's meant to be animated, but even animated, it still comes across as kind of uninspiring and flat. She has a really small, petite, feminine frame, which they managed to capture pretty well, but unfortunately, in order to get these ball shoulders, the shoulder joints, in order for them to be big enough to actually work as a joint, they look out of proportion with the rest of her really, really thin arms. Being one of the earlier figures in the line, she doesn't have much as far as a rocker ankle goes, so her posability is limited because of that. And given how thin these limbs are, it's really hard to get her to kind of stand up anyway. That being said, as bland as this figure is, she does have one of the absolute greatest code names in all of comic history. For a character whose ability is to replicate themselves, to create clones of their own body, to come up with the name Duplicate, oh, it's just absolutely brilliant. I mean, you know, it makes fun of it, but it still holds it true at the same time. The only thing better, the only name better maybe than Duplicate is her twin brother who has the exact same abilities, and his code name is Multipole. Duplicate and Multipole. It's just brilliant. Now, as devastatingly bland as this figure is, it's shocking to know I have purchased more of these than any other because in an attempt to really get the look of Duplicate, I needed more than one. And you can see she did come with one other alternate head sculpt. You've got kind of the placid head and the more angry head, but what you really notice is the different numbers on the different replicant's body. And that's because Diamond Select did actually a really cool thing with Duplicate's accessories. She actually didn't come with a number on her chest. You had to apply it yourself, and each figure came with a sheet of stickers so that you could determine just exactly which clone we used. And so you can see I've used up several of the ones to create my figures, but these sticker sheets came with every single figure. But that wasn't the best part. For a character whose superpower is basically fighting en masse, you're going to end up dying a lot. And that is what came with our Duplicate figure. Look, here's a severed leg with all the guts flowing out. You got broken arms where they've been ripped from the shoulder and split in half below the elbow. You got extra guts pieces that you could splay out all around. And because I bought 3 of these figures, I have got a ton of different Duplicate parts that you can set up into one of the most gory dioramas of all time.
The supernatural curse that provides Amanda with the ability to become the hulking monster girl comes with a price. Each transformation de-ages her just a bit more, making the 24-year-old appear to only be 12.
The Monster Girl figure came with her civilian form. So here is Amanda in all her 26-year-old slash 12-year-old glory. She's got her little ponytail. She has kind of her cute little keds on. And the articulation is obviously pretty limited. There's a limited ball joint here at the shoulder and a little bit of articulation at the head. Really, okay, there is actually a waist swivel. So, there's some, but you have no bend at the knee, no bend at the elbow. But if you feel like you got cheated by this figure, let me tell you, this more than makes up for it. Holy cow. Look at how big this thing is. I mean, it is truly a massive, massive figure. And with this size comes a lot of really great articulation. You can see that double joint across the waist and then the torso cut on that swivel allows for some awesome posing. Now we're starting to see the more advanced ankle rockers. Again, fully and completely necessary for a figure of this size. There's no way this beast would stand up without that. A little hint, you can't tell here, but Monster Girl actually has boy parts down here. So that's something that you guys might want to file away and very likely could become important later on in this series. Now, I've got the angry head sculpt on there, but this one actually came with two additional head sculpts. There's a grumpy looking head for when Robot is inappropriately flirting with her, and a slightly smirking head for when she likes it. In addition to those bonus heads, you get pairs of fist as well as pairs of open hands. I kind of like splitting the difference and having one of each. Overall, this is one of the top figures in this line. It is really a standout. And when you pair it with the tiny Amanda figure, it is hard to beat.
Genetically engineered to be the US government's greatest weapon, Eve Wilkins has carved her own path as one of the universe's most powerful beings, Adam Eve.
We talked about what a great job Corey Walker did with his design for Robot. And we've talked about the absolute brilliance of naming characters that Robert Kirkman has had with Multipol and Duplicate. Well, both of those skill sets come together fully for Adam Eve. Oh, what a brilliant name. And actually, Corey Walker really brought the whole thing together with the design of the suit. Now, you have a relatively monochromatic suit, much like what you saw with Robot. It's a pink on pink design, but it still works. And the little sort of miniature cape really, really goes with that. And all of it is offset by her red hair, something that I think they've done a really great job in the animated series as well as in the comic. But it's her chest logo that pulls the whole thing together. As you can see, her chest logo shows the international symbol for female, which is the Eve part of it, along with the spinning electron pattern around, which captures the idea of the atom. So Adam Eve is perfectly represented in this suit. Now, the anime looking style is maybe a little bit off. Her eyes are kind of maybe a little bit big. Again, she was pretty early, but she does have decent articulation. I do like the fact that the thigh swivel is hidden by her sort of shorts right there. And she came with some pretty cool different effects for her hands that would showcase her different power sets. Eve really is one of the most powerful characters on the show. I would say that she could go pretty well toe to toe with Immortal and is right there underneath the Viltrumites, depending on how she uses her powers. Her ability to manipulate all matter is, almost unparalleled. And we get a little bit of a sense with this, with these fist hands that have her powers kind of popping off of them. She did come with a second set of exploding things that I think are maybe meant to fit onto these fists. There's a little slot there, but I really don't want to break those just to try to put the slightly bigger versions in. That being said, when Eve was solicited, we saw all of these different parts. But when she actually came out in stores, she included something that we had not seen until she actually showed up. And that is this little miniature figure of Shrinking Ray. This thing is teeny, and even though it is not articulated, there are some really amazing paint apps. You can see her glasses and the R symbol on her chest. Now, fun fact about Shrinking Ray, she joined the Guardians of the Globe when they had their recruitment drive after Omni-Man basically killed the entire team. But in the comics, Shrinking Ray, R-A-Y, was a dude, whereas on the cartoon, Shrinking Ray, R-A-E, is a female. One of those things that I think doesn't really matter for the overall story, but is kind of a cool little substitute in. So, really cool that we got this tiny little version of Shrinking Ray.
Rex Splode is perhaps the most fully realized character in the series. Rex's arc has seen him go from being a selfish heel, I mean, he's really a prick, to a hero willing to sacrifice himself for his friends.
Sadly, we are coming up on our last unique character released by Diamond Select in their Invincible Toys line, and it is none other than Rex Splode. Love him or hate him, and much more likely you hated him and then you loved him. This figure really shows what this line could have been had it carried on. Because not only did they get a great representation of Rex's costume, you've got really solid articulation that does not disrupt the continuity of the sculpt, but we got three separate heads. Here is kind of the flat faced masked head, the oh so Rex screaming for his life head, which really kind of replicates so much of his action scenes that we saw on the cartoon, and an unmasked sculpt, which really captures the essence of Rex's character. You know, he's got kind of his shaved heads on the side with his little tiny man bun back there. And this look, I think, really means that much more now that we know the character's fate and the fact that Robot or Rudy decided to clone his body and utilize it as his own. And so that steampunk pipe that we see on the back of Robot's head really does kind of mimic the man bun that we see here with Rex. Now, the three heads are cool, and you got plenty of different hands. Here's a open one, here's a fist one, but Rex actually came with some powered up looks as well. Yeah, that's right. He came with these really cool translucent powered up arms. You simply pull it off at the shoulders and peg these in, and they look really great. The one is in a fist, the other, he's actually holding one of his rods fully powered up. Really great look. The entire plastic is translucent. And so what they did is they painted the bicep area to match the rest of his costume and then let it fade down into the powered up look. So a really, really choice way to go out for Diamond Select, and certainly the kind of thing that hopefully we're going to see with future figures of Invincible.
So, as this line ends, the excitement for what Jada Toys might do with the property begins. Who do you want to see in a potential upcoming line? Do you need all of these characters done over again? Or do you want new figures like Conquest, Anissa, Oliver, Battle Beast? Or do you like me and you just want it all? Debbie, Cecil, Donald? Sound off in the comments. And as always, for the best in comics history and action figures, subscribe to Carbon Scoring.